Chapter 1705, Yan Kai landed lightly on a lotus leaf and looked up to the front. Until this time, he had no time to look at people. Unexpectedly, the man was actually a half-old man with a short stature. Even if he stood upright, Yan Kai estimated that he would be shorter than him by a head, and his complexion was dark, like the bottom of a pot. Comparing each other, perhaps because his treasure was exploited by Yan Kai, his dark old face became even darker. He was wearing a simple shirt made of unknown sea animal skins. The strands looked tattered. Pieces of high-grade muscles were exposed, full of explosive power, which was eye-catching. It can be said that this old guy is a little shorter, and his body proportions are extremely well proportioned. This is the most intuitive manifestation of the physical quality. The old man obviously did not expect that Yan Kai could take his own punch without falling into the wind. After landing, he frowned slightly, and then rushed over at a faster speed. He roared, "You kid, either you will die today or this old man is dead. Yang has mined 2/3 of the muddy heavenly lotus, which is more serious than killing his old life. How can he easily let Yan Kai go?" If possible, Yan Kai didn't want to fight with such a person in a muddle, but seeing his expression and tone, he knew that this matter could not be solved, and he rarely encountered someone like the old man. Naturally, his opponent was somewhat delighted by the hunt. Instead of flinching, he greeted him with a big laugh. In midair, the two figures separated at once, and it took a long time before there was a violent sound. In the second match, the two were still indifferent, and neither had an advantage. There was no time to breathe, and the two rushed towards each other again. The school dolphin hid in the lake on the island. Looking up, his eyes filled with worry. Boom boom boom. The sound of explosions continued to be heard on the island, and Yan Kai and the old man gradually moved the battlefield so as not to affect the sea lotuses in the lake. At this point, both of them have the same scruples and don't want to destroy the precious alchemy materials. After a cup of tea worth of time, the battlefield was moved to the sea. Yan Kai had no scruples, his eyes bright. He exerted his physical power to the limit, entangled with the unknown old man, and fought. This savage way of fighting made him experience unprecedented hesitation. He laughed loudly, ignoring his injuries, as if he was going to fight his life with the old man, never revealing a sign of defeat. The old man looked awe-inspiring, secretly surprised. It has been hundreds of years since he came to Shadowed Soul Island. He already knew what kind of cultivation method he should choose to survive here, but a young man who didn't want to pop up suddenly could actually fight him in a colorful way. The physical quality of this young man is not inferior to himself. The sound of broken bones was heard constantly, and blood splashed. The old man was surprised to find that the blood of this young man was not red, but a golden color. The golden blood contained the power of chi and blood and energy fluctuations that made him dumbfounded. It seemed that the blood of this young man was comparable to the most precious divine material. "Boy, your good fortune is over." The old man's eyes turned, his wrists turned, and a hammer-like artifact suddenly appeared on the palm of his hand, while Yan Kai blocked his punch. With a fierce wave, he slammed on Yan Kai's forehead. Although he couldn't use the Saint Yuan and could not exert the full power of this secret treasure, but with the great strength of the old man, this hammer was enough to break the world. If he is really hit, Yan Kai's head will definitely explode. Yan Kai didn't expect this old guy to be so cunning. Seeing the hammer approaching, his pupils shrank slightly, and his head was quickly tilted. At the same time, his body suddenly burst into a colorful glow. A multicolored light glowed and circulated. Gradually, the earth yellow light occupied the entire body, covering Yan Kai's body. Indestructible 5-element sword, the sword of earth. The earth sword chi cultivated by Yan Kai uses great amplifier divine sand as its energy source. This rare origin king level material has a very high defense. Under the control of Yan Kai's divine sense, the sword energy of the earth quickly condensed into a shield shape, blocking the front of the hammer. Boom! The earth yellow energy shield was blasted away, and the hammer hit Yan Kai's shoulder. Yan Kai's body sank slightly, but he adjusted it in the next moment. He grinned. His body was short, and he broke into the defense of the old man, lifting his hands upwards. The old man screamed and hurried back, but he still couldn't escape this counterattack. The chin was supported by Yan Kai's hands, and the whole head suddenly leaned back. If his physical cultivation wasn't strong enough, this one alone would be enough to kill him. In this way, the old man also pretended to pass out, and he was almost dead. He staggered back and withdrew more than a dozen feet. Before he could stand firm, he looked at Yan Kai with fear, and then quickly fled. Yan Kai frowned and stood there without chasing after him. It wasn't until the old man's figure disappeared from his vision that he twisted his shoulder that was hit by the hammer. There was a clicking sound, and the dislocated bone recovered. This old guy, Yan Kai thoughtfully, from beginning to end, he didn't have the time to ask the old man what he came from and why he lived so far from Shadowed Soul Island. The cries of the little dolphins came from the lake on on the island. Yankai turned his head and looked at it, and found that the school dolphins were watching him nervously, as if he was worried about whether he was injured. Yankai cast a relieved look at it, and walked over. 1/3 of the sea lotus in the lake and the island was not collected, so Yankai naturally didn't plan to let it go. Just now the old man called these sea lotuses muddy heavenly lotus. Yankai can be sure that he has never heard of such things before, probably just like his previous guess. Muddy heavenly lotus is a special product of Shadowed Soul Island. Only in Shadowed Soul Island. No one can take it outside. After a while, Yankai collected all the muddy heavenly lotuses. If he looked up with feeling, he found that on a mountain a few miles away, the old man was standing there with a look of grief and angrily, looking at this side with helpless eyes. That kind of feeling is as if the woman she has been caring for was easily captured by other men. Yankai grinned at him. The old man's lungs were almost exploding. He turned around and walked away. He couldn't beat Yankai, and instead of taking his own humiliation, it was better not to see. Yankai found a simple wooden house nearby, which was also built by the old man. He went in. 3 days later, Yankai was studying the medicinal effects of muddy heavenly lotus and that kind of body tempering pill. When he hoped to improve it to perfection, a slight footstep suddenly heard outside the wooden house. Yankai smiled slightly, put aside the things on hand, and waited quietly. After a while, the door of the wooden house was opened, and the old man stood in the distance with a blue face, about a dozen feet away from Yankai. He looked at Yankai with an extremely complicated look. After a long time, he said in a deep voice, "You are not Mingyu." Yankai frowned and asked, "Who is Mingyu?" A stunned look appeared on the old man's face, and he looked at Yankai seriously, as if he wanted to see if he was lying. Yankai's eyes were clear, and he looked back with inquiring eyes. The old man nodded secretly, his attitude eased a little, and there was no such grief of killing his father and the hatred of taking his wife. He slowly said, "You don't know Mingyu. It seems that you have just entered Shadowed Soul Island not long ago." This old man is wise, Yankai casually saying. "You are right, I have only been here for almost a month." No wonder. The old man squeezed a smile on his face. "Very ugly. Since you are not from Mingyu, then we can talk about it." "That's what I meant." Yankai smiled slightly. If it weren't for this, he wouldn't stay on this island. He didn't understand the situation of Shadowed Soul Island, and he couldn't go deep into the Shadowed Soul Island to inquire. He finally encountered a living person here, and at first glance, he was the kind of person who had lived here for many years. Naturally, he should make good use of it. "Can I come in and talk?" the old man asked depressedly. Of course, this is the old man's residence, Yankai invited freely. The old man's mouth twitched, but he didn't mean much to be afraid. Although he felt that he was unlikely to be Yankai's opponent, if he really worked hard, he would have the confidence to escape from Yankai. He believed that Yankai would not be stupid enough to fight with himself. After the old man sat in front of him, Yankai asked, "Who is this Mingyu you this old man just mentioned?" The old man snorted coldly, "A thief." Yankai was stunned, thinking that this old guy and Mingyu seemed to have a lot of hatred, otherwise the old man would grit his teeth when he mentioned the name. "He is the current master of Shadowed Soul Island," the old man added. "Mingyu is the island master." Yankai raised his brows. When he first came to Shadowed Soul Island, he heard the slender man mention the word island master, but he didn't expect to know the name of the island master in the old man. "Indeed." Yankai rolled his eyes and asked with a smile, "This old man said that he is the current master of Shadowed Soul Island. Could there be other masters before?" The old man glanced at Yankai in surprise, secretly admiring his sharp thinking, and then proudly said, "The last island master was this old man." Yankai froze for a moment, then clasped his fist and said, "I was disrespectful. Huh, the greed dog." The old man ridiculed himself unpretentiously, and said, "Now the old man can only hide here and steal his life. What is disrespectful, let alone, this old man was even defeated by you. It's just a fluke," Yankai said modestly. The old man no longer entangled in this issue, staring deeply at Yankai. "Have you cultivated extremely advanced body cultivation techniques?"